Welcome back to another episode of the Epic Epoch podcast. This is episode 19. I'm your host, PerryThePig. With me, as always, is my co-host,
Dread from Epic Builds.
And today we are even joined by friend of the podcast, AlmostPI. Almost, thanks for being here.
Hey, good to be here.
Do you want to be Almost? Do you want to be Pi? Do you want to be Almost Pi?
Normally just Pi is good.
Just Pi is good. All right, excellent.
Yeah.
So we have a makeshift camera on the screen here, a little bit of 3.14 Apple Pie on the screen. So
it's almost a camera.
Thanks for throwing that together. I appreciate it. So we are right smack in the middle of patch 0.85. So before multiplayer, but we did have a little bit of news coming out for Last Epoch that we're going to be talking about toward the end of the day today.
Rad City.
Rad City. So we're going to be talking about that later on. But before we get into our very first topic here, I just want to go ahead and welcome AlmostPI to the podcast. Pi, who are you? Do people in the community know who you are? What are you doing out there these days?
I did a video with Dread a while ago with the Void Knight race, where I got lucky and dropped a Ravenous Void.
It was the Abyssal Echo, the
Abyssal Echoes thing. Most of the time I'm more of just a casual lover of RPGs and ARPGs and all stuff like this. And I play a lot of Path of Exile and Last Epoch, and
then briefly,
casual has a mage blood. Casual.
I'm trying to give you more credit. I'm saying briefly, you were rank 1 in hardcore SSF on the ladder as well with the Void Knight race.
Yeah.
So you've been playing a little bit of Path of Exile and a little bit of Last Epoch recently. How's Path of Exile going for you?
Pretty well. My league has been going well for my goals so far, and it's been a lot of fun. Even with the drama over the Arch Nemesis changes, I don't know how much that has bled over into the Last Epoch world, but it hasn't been popular on Twitter or anywhere else. But I don't mind them too much. I think long term they'll be good, but they definitely need some work, some more fine tuning.
I've been having a good time keeping up on Reddit and Twitter, trying to see what's going on with the Arch Nemesis stuff.
Yeah.
Who's happy about things, who's bad about, or like who's mad, but it's good from my perspective, keeping up and seeing the drama. Maybe if you're in the thick of it, maybe it's not as much fun, but hey, that's just me.
See, the problem is we're all used to ArcNem stuff because we're used to Diamond Matrons, so it doesn't really matter.
I want more Diamond Matrons. We're going to have a whole podcast about that someday.
Oh boy.
Before that, Dread, how's your week been? What have you been up to?
Been playing a lot of PoE. I just finished the EK Nova build. I finally grinded up my Ashes of the Stars. Did, I think, probably well over 50 Searing Exarchs and no Crystallized Omniessence, so I had to self-farm the Ashes so I could play EK Nova Chieftain, and it felt great in the end. I was able to just simply tank Searing Exarchs, like Turbo Exarchs and stuff. I couldn't do Uber, sadly, because those meteors.
Mm-hmm.
But the build felt great, and now I am rolling into a Poison Tornado Occultist for the memes.
So same skill, different mastery or different ascendancy?
Yeah, I mean, in the EK Chieftain, you just use a tornado for extra damage, but we're actually using the tornado for its actual flat damage, which will be interesting.
Interesting. All right.
Excited to see how that goes.
It's funny. One of the things you mentioned is already one of the topics that I want to talk about. So I think I was gonna do this in the order of 1 and 2, but instead I'm gonna do the order of 2 and 1. So if you're gonna mention Ashes of the Stars, let's talk about unique items. So that's the whole topic for today, right?
Yep.
For unique items, I guess. So I've been playing a lot of Last Epoch. I haven't really taken a break. I've been doing all these weekend races and whatnot. But I know both of you, despite having played a lot of Last Epoch in the past and both making a lot of videos for it, been playing some Path of Exile. So I figured that this would be a good time to talk about unique items, maybe set items as well, and then the ones that are maybe not quite strong enough, but you want to use them, and then even the ones that are maybe a bit too strong and kind of stop you from using those more interesting items. So then we'll talk about that little piece of Rat City news at the very end of the day today. So speaking of Ashes of the Stars, let's start out here. Let's start out talking about unique items that are overwhelmingly strong and are pushing out the competition for their jobs. Are there items like that in Path of Exile?
Oh yeah.
Oh,
so how are unique items over there these days?
I think as a whole, looking at unique items, they're still kind of in a good place. Where if you look as a whole group, rares are normally better, and then there's their build enabling uniques, but then there's the outliers, and Your classic example before this league is Headhunter, and that's kind of been in more in the know. Like
Not
Headhunter's a very
anymore.
known item, and now it's kind of having some drama. But there's still Mage Blood, and more recently Ashes and Omniscience as just the best items, almost without argument, except for very niche scenarios.
So these are like items that you're putting into your build before you even know what your build is. You pop
for
open
sure.
POV,
Yeah.
you pop open,
Easily.
LastEpochTools.com, and before anything else, you put in, Ash of the Stars or Mage Blood, or I guess in our case back in Last Epoch, you might even put in a Bastion. Like, I'm going to use a shield. I'm probably not going to use a staff. There's no unique staff. There's no unique, two-hander. Bastion. And then you figure out the rest of the build behind that. So in a way, these things are kind of like stifling out other things, other like items that you're using. The first thing that I wrote down was Bastion. Speaking of Last Epoch, I was talking about Bastion versus Face of the Mountain. And I hope that my math was right earlier today. So Face of the Mountain is a unique shield. It gives you extra block chance per overcapped endurance that you have, 2 for 1. So if you want to use that in order to cap your endurance, it's kind of interesting, right? You're giving up suffixes, you're giving up life, you're giving up resistances. It's a really cool way of like putting these things together in order to get like 250% endurance would cap your block chance. Or you can just use a Bastion and then be done with it. So I guess what does Ashes the Stars do for you? We know what Bastion does. Is it that bad when it comes to Path of Exile as well?
It's essentially the only way to like use alt quality gems to their most potential, because it's the only way of getting a flat 30% quality to all your gems, like all your active gems. So it's literally the only way. Like if you want to play Poison Spark, like there's only one way to do it, and it's with Ashes and alt quality Ashes of the Stars. So it's pretty build enabling.
So
Yeah,
it's
that's
not
just-
necessarily like it's not giving you raw power. It's just like it happens to work with this other niche scenario that came in the past. Like that's one of the things that happens when you have like this much bloat over time. Like you have Heist League, and then you have League, and then Ashes of the Stars, and then these two things just work perfectly together.
Well,
Well,
I'm pretty.
actually has a little bit of raw power on there too, though, because it just gives
Yeah.
+1 to all your skills, which in Path of Exile is like it's more than just an extra skill point. It just base stats of the skill go up in a
Yeah.
lot of cases, and that skill's really high.
And as well, it's just generic as well. It works for everything, including like your purities, your empowers. Well, not your empowers, but like it works for a lot of different stuff, and it's very versatile. It has that mana reservation efficiency. And to liken it to an item now, I would say like Lich's Scorn is a very good example of like an item that's a lot like it, because of the fact that like it's so build enabling. Like if you're playing Cold Lich, like Cold Necromancer, you are playing with Lich's Scorn probably, right? And it's if you're playing anything with alt quality. And the thing is with Ashes though, it's just so strong that you just run it anyways. Like it's not even that bad. Like there's so many uses for that alt quality stuff. You get the reservation. There's just so many different scenarios where it's good.
This sounds to me like stacking up aura effectiveness, like a couple leagues ago in Path of Exile, where like it's only 6% increased effective auras, but when you put in a bunch of auras, like that's all of a sudden scaling offense and defense with the same amount of text. And like once you get that, it kind of reminds me of a build that Lizard played in Last Epoch recently, just stacking up as much HP and defense as possible on his Blade Dancer Juggernaut build, where he just wanted to get hit so that he could get more Dust Shrouds, get more Glancing Blows, which gives more defense, and then he used that in order to scale his poison damage, because he gets like more damage per Dust Shroud on him. So like once you can scale offense and defense at the same time in any game, it's like that's it. It just reminds me of Archmage. It reminds me of Righteous Fire. It reminds me of all these things like
Serpent Strike.
Yeah, it's like a little bit too strong, right? I mean, we like it, but it's a little bit too strong. So I wrote down another item, and I want to float this by you when it comes to Last Epoch. So items that are overwhelmingly strong, that push out the competition for their job. I put down 2 good examples that I liked. I think Bastion's a great example. To me, in hardcore, when I play a bow character, I think Arrow Guard is a good example as well. It's just you can't really cap your Glancing Blow chance, and you really want that layer of defense when you're playing a bow character. So here's an item that I think, looking through all the unique items in Last Epoch, I think it fits this. Is Twisted Heart overwhelmingly strong?
I think
Does it push out other unique items for the job?
I think the problem with Twisted Heart specifically is not the fact of its unique effect, like the gain ward and consume HP for it. It's the fact that it comes on an implicit that gives you 20% increased health. You get a buttload of strength, and you also get a buttload of cast speed, all in one item. And +1 to your skills as well.
And you get +1. Yeah, you get a lot of stuff for that item.
Yeah, you get it is a lot like Ashes in that regard, where you just get so much in one little bundle. Like if you get HP on a suffix on that thing, it can give you just as much HP as like a rare chest can give you.
Yeah, I've been farming that on my cold dot bear when I've been doing Last Epoch. It's a good item.
Like even if you're not using one of the stats, even if you're not using the most important stat, which is like the life converted to ward, it still ends up being pretty good.
It's like an extra HP like chest.
Because my cold dot bear, like that's a downside. I just lose some health and then the ward goes away. But I leech it back up and it's fine. And I'm using
it doesn't matter for you because you're barely casting spells as the werebear. You're using work, right? Yeah, you don't actually interact with the downside at all. With that,
it does actually proc off Warcry. It does get the cold. It does get the cold tag when you spec into some of the nodes.
Oh yeah, you're right. It does.
Yeah, with the roar.
Right. You're right. I forgot.
But even so, and it's not even that Twisted Heart pushes out just the uniques. It pushes out the rares bases too, and your exalted bases.
So I was actually thinking about including another. I was thinking about including an item on this list that was a little bit more contentious, but I really like Grimoire as a unique relic, and I might be alone on that. There might be someone out there who agrees with me, who's been playing a lot of Lost Ark recently, but we'll see if we can get Mao back in the world of Last Epoch. So I think Grimoire is really good, even if you're playing like an attack-based build or something. Just that extra layer of defense. To me, when it comes to defense in the Last Epoch, less damage taken is king. Like you can get 2,000 life, 3,000 life, maybe 4,000 life, but if you don't have multiple layers of less damage taken, it's not that good. Like it's just life at the end of the day.
Do you think Grimoire is that good without LP though?
I think it went 0 to hero with the LP change.
Yeah,
it gives the fact that it's so common with LP is probably
that helps. Yeah,
if it had a higher LP level and didn't drop with 4 LP, often,
I think I have like 6 3 LP ones in my stash.
I have like 2 4 LPs. Yeah, I don't know. That thing's a little bit common. So those are the first couple items that came to mind. So I think there's a much broader category of conversation here. So we talked about like unique items that are overwhelmingly strong, things that push out other things. Like we played Path of Exile. We know how good Headhunter is. We know how good these items are.
Yeah.
What about unique items that you want to use but just aren't good enough? When it comes to Last Epoch, like we have LP, and LP goes a long way, but it doesn't solve everything. So what's on your mind? Tell me about unique items you want to use but just aren't strong enough.
Any unique amulet that isn't badge, crystallized omniscience, ashes, and like anything that's a unique amulet other than that right now is very contentious right now because just how generically strong some of these items are. Like unique amulets, like you look at one and you're like, oh, is it a badge? No. Oh, is it an ashes? No. Is it omniscience? No. Okay, just leave it on the ground.
Is that pushing out rare amulets as well, like double influence insane items?
Yeah,
that's honestly a cost thing too. You can kind of make some items in Path of Exile that are comparable, but the cost to do so, the crafting cost to do so, is astronomical compared to just getting this unique item that is now more rare, but it's still cheaper than an item that can compete with it. Yeah,
and eventually the market's going to be flooded with that unique item. Like
it's getting bought out. Like it's stayed pretty low availability on softcore this league. I don't think I've seen it above 50. I haven't checked recently,
it was like 2x 2% drop chance. I mean, so like even like it has the ability of being able to be bought out. So as long as that's the case, and since there's no div cards for it, and invitation farming takes a lot of time, I think it will stay relatively high because there's a lot of people that want to use it. It's not the fact that it's just rare, right? Like there are rare items like shavs. Like for instance, Pi keeps talking about shavs when he drops one. He's like, "Oh, it's rare,"
Yeah,
but it's fucking like 20
it's not
C.
that
Back
expensive.
back
yeah,
in
yeah.
my day, I
Yeah.
started playing Path of Exile long enough ago that shavs was an exciting item. Get a
Oh,
couple.
I
of
still get
bucks for that.
excited
No,
when I drop
it's
one.
excited.
Yeah,
It's just
it's a cool
rare.
item.
Yeah, but nobody's using it currently. So guess what? It's 20 C, and that's the difference. Is like you can have a rare unique, but if it's not being used, then it's not going. It's not gonna like go up in price at all.
So is there a system like what can you do in Path of Exile to make like a unique item a little bit better than it is just by its base?
It's a lot harder in Path of Exile because you gotta like corrupt, double corrupt. You can like do the quality stuff with the catalyst. There's a few things you can do, but it's nowhere near at the same level as like Last Epoch. Like when we think about something like a unique item like Mage Blood, for instance, it's just like that's it. That's Mage Blood. You don't think about double corrupting it unless you're trying to quit the league or some shit. And with Last Epoch, whenever we think of like unique items, we think of the legendary potential now. Like it's one and one and the same. Like you don't think of using just a unique item without LP unless there's something like a Bastion or a Ravenous Void, right? It's like you don't it's inseparable, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So when it comes to Last Epoch, I did write down it was I actually started this whole list of conversation by making this this comment here. So cool items, unique effects, and then I wrote down unique items that don't quite fit in the game as it stands. Like maybe this is a unique item that doesn't work in Path of Exile, but it would work in Last Epoch, or maybe something that doesn't work in Grim Dawn, but would work in Path of Exile, but it just exists in the wrong game. And the thing that I wrote down for that is a unique pair of gloves that isn't Ravenous Void, but it drops from the same boss. So this is like, I really want to use this item in Last Epoch. It's called Sacrificial Embrace. And it's just, it's all over the place. I wish this thing were usable.
Well,
So-
in theory, if you go non-crit with the Volcanic Orb build, like, with the
maybe.
new spear,
Maybe.
But then you're playing non-crit, and then you have different problems.
Well, to be fair, your weapon for the Volcanic Orb build doesn't have any crit on it, so maybe you can get away with it.
I think running the +4 base crit helmet is easier than trying to run those gloves.
I think so too. So Sacrificial Embrace, it's funny. One of the complaints that I have about Sacrificial Embrace is it says your crits deal no extra damage, and then it says like when you crit, you gain these other buffs. So it's kind of like Elemental Overload from Path of Exile, which to be fair is something that I think would work so well if it just got ported over into Last Epoch in some form or fashion. So this pair of gloves says like your crits deal no extra damage, but you gain these other things when you crit, and then sometimes you get some like big like one big chunk of void damage. So the other, non-crit item in the game, it says you cannot crit. And that's Singularity. So like there's some kind of tension between like, are we supposed to have crit chance and no crit multi? Are we supposed to have no crit chance and have more damage instead? Like there's only like 2 or 3 non-crit items in the game, and they don't even work together. So it's like if this were in a different game, if this existed somewhere else, it'd be awesome. But as it is, just not quite.
Well, it's partly because there's just no support for it. Like when you when you look at the trees, there's nothing that like benefits you for just not critting. Like there's no opportunity cost. Like sure, like you got a gear for it. But with legendaries, it's pretty easy to gear now. You even have that new helmet that like gives you like 300% crit. You just have to deal with your sustain elsewhere. Like crit's so easy to build that trying to tempt you without critting is just not a thing that happens. Like because there's just no reason to not crit. Like I'll be honest, like 400% more damage is 400% more damage. It doesn't matter how you get to it. It's still gonna be better than 20% more damage, right? Or whatever else like the The gloves do. The thing with the gloves I like is they work really well with like elemental damage over time spells because you get the void damage over time, and then the non-crit part doesn't matter. But then it falls apart because the only like archetype that somewhat supports this is like uh what is it? Right. It's static orb. Yeah, the static orb dot damage thing, but then
Mhm.
that has like the smallest AoE to ever exist. So it's not used. So it's like you can make it do damage, but it's not used because, it sucks, but that's the only place I can see it being used right now.
To be fair, that build with the lightning damage over time charge ground is an exorbitant amount of damage. It's just the teeny tiny little AoE from Static Orb.
Yeah, Abyssal Echoes is another good way of using it.
So what about
That'd be interesting.
Path of Exile then? What about like are there items in Path of Exile that feel like they don't fit, or like things that are like super cool, very fun to think about, but just don't end up in your builds these days?
Oh yeah, definitely.
I'll let you go first, Pi.
Yeah, so a personal one for me, it's an item called Akuna's Will. And it lets you treat your walking zombies as corpses. And so at least for me, when I'm looking for unique items and stuff that I think is fun, there's a similar item, it's just stuff that does like changes the rules of the game basically. So you can raise zombies from nothing without corpses with these gloves, and you raise zombies count as corpses. So before Detonate Dead became the meta that it is right now, I tried to make these work just as a raise a zombie and explode it, because you could scale minion life way higher than you could corpse life previously. Before it got introduced as passive options on the skill tree. And so it was a little bit clunky, but it was a lot of fun just to mess with and try these different synergies out. And then it kind of just fell off the wayside. It got introduced in Legion, I believe, and then they reworked Necromancer a little bit. It got more corpse synergy. They added it to the skill tree, and then suddenly this rule change didn't matter anymore because the corpses that you summoned with Desecrate or Unearth or that were just on the ground with your Necromancer bonuses were just better. They gave you shock, they gave you chill. You can scale their life a lot more simply now, just with the skill tree, instead of having to devote an entire link, an entire skill slot, basically, to these
And
zombies.
and gloves are a very contentious spot now because of all the Eldritch currency. Like if you're not using
The
a
new
rare pair,
influences, yep.
if you're not using a rare pair of gloves, then you probably have a pretty damn good reason not to.
Yeah. You see body swap in chat. Yeah, that's a fun
I
ability. You
I
could
just
body swap to your zombies.
I,
Yeah.
I wanna go on the record. We did play cast on crit body swap using Akuna's Will back in the day. It was a nightmare. It was build
Yeah,
one for
yeah.
this
It's
light.
like
We did it
it's
though,
such
and
a
that
cool
counts.
item. It's such a cool item. It's like, oh, and it has so many possibilities. It's like, wait, it doesn't work quite the way you want it to.
So
Yeah, I think a perfect foil to that item in Last Epoch. Oh, go ahead, Barry. You're gonna say something.
I was gonna say like when I think about items that just aren't quite good enough in Last Epoch, I think about things that like it's got all this cool text, but it's got no life on it. So I can just put life on it with LP. But that doesn't quite work in Path of Exile.
I think the perfect example of an item that falls short because it's so close but yet so far, kind of like Akuna's Will, is Leviathan Carver.
Oh, the big
Every
two-handed
single
sword.
time I want to use the Leviathan Carver, I am reminded that big hit build sucks still. Like it was amazing to put that much effort into like an erasing strike build and still only get like 3 million crits. Like that much effort, which you could just emulate that with literally anything else. And it's not just like, oh, like press button, I smack. No, it's like I void cleave twice, I abyssal echo, and I have really good gear. It's not like as if
You
I
type
have
in the
bad
whole
gear.
Konami code and then like
Yeah,
boom.
Oh yeah.
and
It reminds me of War Cries and Path of Exile.
yeah.
It's just
But at least
shout,
with the
shout,
war
shout, shout,
cries, they
slam.
do enough damage. That's the difference, though.
Yeah, they
Like
used to.
you could,
Yeah.
well, yeah, they used to. I mean, with the new
Yeah, the
helm,
new
but
helm
it's
could be
not.
cool. I
Yeah,
haven't tested it yet.
it's not enough, but you get what I mean, though. Like the problem with the Leviathan Carver is like the big hit archetype is just not an art. Like the biggest problem with the Leviathan Carver is if you're playing it with Earthquake, or you're playing it with this, or playing it with that. The biggest benefit of melee physical damage in Last Epoch right now is armor shred. Okay, now how are we supposed to stack armor shred if the base attack rate of the thing is 0.76? And that's why I like the idea of ailment effectiveness for skills that have added damage effectiveness. So, for instance, if you had a 100% chance to armor shred, right, on hit, and you had like 400% ailment effectiveness, you would get to like 500% chance to armor shred. And that starts to sound a lot better. Like, that's like a lot more in the reality of like things. You get like an armor shred roll on your weapon, like 200%, I think, for a two-hander, and automatically you put 10 stacks of shred on the target when you hit them. Now, obviously, they would have to limit some stuff. They would have to make it so it's only Earthquake that gets that, or skills that get the added damage effectiveness and all that. And that would be closer to fix it. But currently, right now, Leviathan Carver is a very, very cool item, and I love it to death. But every single time I try to use it, it's just like, can I just use like a rare sword and just be better off?
Have a little bit more attack speed than just 0.
Yeah, something they could look into maybe, something PoE does is they separate damaging elements and non-damaging elements, and you can scale them differently.
Yeah,
And so doing so, because like something like that with poison would probably be a little bit absurd in Last Epoch, but if it was separate just to non-damaging, so it was just like, oh, your chill effectiveness or your armor shred effectiveness, I think that'd be really interesting, actually.
Well, I wonder how absurd it would be with poison. Like, if you're only hitting once every 3 seconds with a poison build, like, I don't know.
It could maybe
That's
enable slower
isn't
attack
it?
speed poison. Yeah, maybe, yeah.
yeah,
Maybe.
it would be a lot more balanced in the realm of Last Epoch because all the big hit skills suck anyways. So giving them any amount of like help would help. Like look at Judgment. The only reason people use it is for Consecrated Aura. Who does hit Judgment anymore? Like,
Well, people try to tell me how good hit judgment is all the time.
it's
Like,
a good
showing me
meme. It's a good meme.
screenshots
You
of
can
10
hit really
million
hard.
damage.
Yeah, you can hit really hard. It's just, But yeah, Leviathan Carver is definitely one of those so close to success stories.
So I did write down another example back in the world of Last Epoch. Remember, if we're talking about like unique items that are cool, but like they're not quite good enough by themselves. So most of the time you have unique items in Last Epoch that you can add I guess not add, but you can drop them with LP, then go through the legendary process and put some extra affixes on them so that they meet whatever your custom build requirement is going to be. There are a couple items that you can't use LP with. And those are a handful of like leveling uniques that you get during the campaign deterministically. So there's like, there's the Avarice Gloves that give you elemental damage to just life. There's Gambler's Fallacy, and then there's Orkirian Petals, which gives you like some Fizz spell crit stuff, just to help you get those builds up and running. So I wrote down that I want to talk about Avarice versus Burning Avarice, which is a new unique item that you can only get from the Soulfire Bastion, that dungeon. So it's kind of the same thing. Whereas, Avarice gives elemental damage to this life, Burning Avarice does the same thing, but it also has something night effect on it, and it also can drop with LP. So there's this way of like getting these early items, but then you can get a more upgraded version of it, and then you can also get it with LPs, so you can continue upgrading it even more past that. And I think that's a great way of like having a solution for these items that aren't quite strong enough. Just make like a new version that drops later on, this Uber version, whatever.
It's like the prophecy system.
Yeah,
It is
doesn't
kind of like the
exist
prophecy
anymore.
system.
Faded items and just upgrades on how they work, yeah, with a similar theme.
And they took prophecy out of Path of Exile.
I think it works a lot better
It
in
did.
Last Epoch because of the LP system, because there's like a wider range of how you can use an item. So it's like when you look at the Burning Avarice, you don't just think Burning Avarice. You think, okay, well, I can get like HP on this. I can get attack speed, I can cast speed, stuff like that. And that's a big difference. It's like these uniques don't even have to be that good, right? They just have to be better than gutter tier, right, to be usable. Like there are plenty of uniques right now that are just barely good enough to see play, just because of the fact that you can put LP on them and they're just extra stats. Like, for instance, I'm looking down the list here. I think a good example would be like, I think Mortality's Grasp.
It's got
Because
life
it just
on it.
gives you a bunch of life. It gives you mark on hit, and that's all you need to know. And if you slap hybrid life, and like maybe some cast speed, you're
how
good
bad
to
could
go.
it be if it's got 2 life rolls on it?
Yeah,
right.
exactly. Yeah,
I would have
it's
said
like-
Bone Clamor helmet. It's got so much text on it, but no life.
The problem
put
with
some
Bone
life on it.
Clamor is it's the problem is the meta around Ward right now doesn't support Ward per second builds currently. So like Bone Clamor used to be a really like Ask Lizard. Bone Clamor used to be a very, very, very strong item back in the day, but now it's like set to the wayside because Ward per second sucks.
Man, I must have started playing Last Epoch right after the whole Ward apocalypse.
Oh,
'Cause,
you
like,
did. You did.
I
You
don't
did.
have any memory. I've been playing for like maybe a year and a half or maybe even more than that at this point. But like, I just have no memory of any time when Ward was good outside of, Shatter Strike or something.
I mean, hey, you got to experience Ash's mortality firsthand. Come on, that's
And
like
it was
that's
so much
essentially
fun.
every single Ward pandemic we've ever had.
That was just a
It's-
fever dream. That wasn't real.
Yeah, I'm saying that's essentially how every single Ward pandemic goes.
That was just that good. Wow.
Yeah, it
Get
just
30,000
becomes that
Ward
good.
and
It
then
just becomes
nerf.
that
Yeah.
obscene.
Hmm.
You gotta
Man,
remember, like back 2 years ago, Diamond Matrons didn't exist, so like you didn't need like 100K Ward. You could do the whole game in 20K. Like you didn't need 100K Ward just to do the game.
I would be okay with just 20,000 Ward right now. That'd be fine. I'll take it. I'll take
Yeah, that sounds
20,000
great.
Ward.
That sounds
That
lovely.
sounds fine. to me.
That's more than they're probably okay with though.
So outside of uniques that we want to use but they aren't quite strong enough, how about an example of like good balance of strength in a gear slot? So this would be like either in Path of Exile or in Last Epoch. Like you're thinking about maybe a belt, maybe a body armor or like a helmet, and you start brainstorming like which unique or like what rare do I want to use, and there's like lots of options.
I think a perfect example right now is the balance currently around belts in Path of Exile because like I know it's crazy to say, but like Mage Blood, yeah, it's really strong. It's also really rare, right? And same thing with Headhunter, but like people have been making some really disgusting like belts, like right pie, like some of these belts I've been looking at, like with the magic quality effect and all that, you can make a pretty nasty belt.
I feel like belt might be a little bit weird just because even ignoring like Mageblood and Headhunter, Stygian Vises are
Insanely strong.
insanely so much better than almost every other belt you can do at a rare level because it just like so you have leather belts, 40 life, that sounds great, right? But on a Stygian Vise,
why not 40 life and crit multi and attack?
exactly on a jewel in the Stygian Vise, it's an additional bonus for no real downside.
Yeah.
There was a period where they couldn't have influence on them, but with the advent of the Conqueror orbs, that's no longer the case. So that's gone, and they're just better. Unless you needed like a niche synthesized based for stat stackers and omniscience, they'll use percent stat implicit belts a lot of the time, and those are great, very niche but very powerful. But otherwise, Stygian Vise kind of just is the king of belts.
Yeah.
I don't even think that's a bad thing for the kind of game that Path of Exile is. I think just like having a customizable implicit, like that's just part of the game.
I think it's
not
great,
out
but it
leather
just
belts or something.
yeah, and it is a late game item too, so it's the difference
Mhm.
between like a leveling gear and an aspirational gear as well.
And
So
getting a high item level one isn't typically easy. Go ahead,
Mhm.
Barry.
Yeah, I was looking at some unique slots. I guess when it comes to like non-unique items, I guess you're just looking at like the base and whichever one you can use. But I actually think that like gloves and boots, when it comes to Last Epoch, I think it's pretty well balanced. Like there's a lot of good gloves out there that I would be happy to put in a build.
Yeah.
Okay, Ravenous Void, but like, I'm playing these weekend tournaments and I don't have access to Ravenous Void, especially in a hardcore. But, outside of Ravenous Void, I think the rest of the glove slots really well balanced. Honestly, even between rares and unique items. Like, do I want Hybrid Life? Do I want Sealed Frailty? Do I want, Shred? Do I want some extra resistance? Like, maybe the prefixes are a little bit boring. Like it's either attack speed, cast speed, or like a couple percentages of increased damage. If you're doing something by stacking up attributes, stacking strength, stacking, like intelligence or something, all of a sudden your prefixes are a little bit more interesting. But I think gloves and boots, through and through, I think they're pretty well balanced in terms
They're
of
just
like
generically good. Just get
like
HP
even
on
for
them, we're good
boots,
to
you have
go.
like, do you want to use a rare pair of boots? Do you want to, I guess there's one thing I want to talk about with boots. But like, do you want to use a rare pair of boots? Do you want to use something that gives you a bunch of flat damage like Morning Frost? Do you want to use like the Ignite / Crit Immune boots? What's the name of them? I forget.
Dragon Fury.
Dragon something, yeah.
Dragon something?
Yeah.
Fire Dragon Shoes? Oh no, I was
Fiery
gonna say they're like my
Dragon
favorite
shoes, yes.
boots.
Let me see if I
Fiery
can find
Dragon
them.
Shoes.
It is
Oh, I
such
love
a
that.
generic name.
Yeah, Fiery Dragon Shoes. Yeah, that's what they're called.
Man,
That's
it sounds.
insanely generic. Come on, you can't blame
It does kind of sound like the name of a pair of boots
Yeah.
from an early access game, doesn't
They're
it?
just called the Critavoid boots now. You know,
The Critavoid boots, they're great.
Yeah.
But let's think of like gloves in Last Epoch are probably my personal favorite slot because even Ravenous Void outside of hardcore, where you're okay with dying every now and then, I don't think Ravenous Void is even the king. Like you got Salt the
Oh,
Wound.
especially now
you got-
after the nerfs. No, it's
yeah,
not.
like there's
No,
so many cool
especially
items.
after
The
the
Raucous
nerfs.
Claws,
Even like
Atrophy,
Wingguard is so good.
yeah,
Wingguard.
Wingguards, like
I
so
really like
many
the
good
glove slots.
slots, especially with LP.
Whenever I get to choose my glove slot, that's like my favorite part. I think because like there's just so many different options. Except for
Jeweler's
like
Obsession recently.
Yeah.
A lot of your stuff has been
Anytime you're playing a minion build, sure. Like even like Jeweler's Obsession, it's not like best in
it's
slot. Like,
multi-dimensional too.
Maybe instead of Jeweler's Obsession, maybe you want to use like Raven's Rise instead.
Raven's Rise,
Like plus
yep.
2.
Yeah.
Like there's some cool options there. I like it a lot.
Yeah, I love the glove slot in Last Epoch.
It's a good time. I like it. So I want to move on to the last scheduled topic of this conversation. So let's talk about the brand new unique item that was just announced today. This is, God, what is this thing called? This is the community unique item.
Lament
It's called
of the Lost Refuge.
Yeah, Lament of the Rat City. Is that it?
It's
Yeah,
just Rat
Rat
City
City.
Spear. We're just
It's
calling
the
it
Rat
Rat
City
City Spear. It's
Lament
Rat
of
City
the
Spear.
So we went through like 4 or 5 weeks of doing like a weekly community vote on what the item was going to be, what the item type, item theme, the unique effect, the item art, and even the item name and some flavor text that everyone was voting on. And this is what we've come up with. So I'm going to link it in chat. I'm not going to show it on screen right now, but you can go ahead and click on that if you want to follow along. So this is a 2-handed spear. And I think the first thing that I want to call out about it is the implicit, because implicits are really strong in Last Epoch. You know, like you're choosing your gloves. Do you want Caspia gloves? Do you want Void Res gloves? You're choosing your boots. Do you want Fire Res? Do you want Cold Res? And like when you have a good gearing experience, it's because you're paying attention to the implicits of your gear. So this is an item that we've never seen before. This is a 2-handed spear. It is a unique.
Oh, it has Rat City.
Rat City
Impaler.
It's
Impaler.
a
I just
unique
realized
Rat
that.
City
Oh my
Impaler.
god, that's
There we
amazing.
go.
They found a way to shove in the name. Oh my
Love
god, that's amazing.
So it's the Rat City Impaler. It has 160 melee physical damage. It's got good attack
That's a lot.
speed, 0.98. Got a ton of flat damage. And then it has 104 spell void damage, which is really not something that we see very often.
And
Do
the
you think that's a
reason why,
range?
it might
Maybe,
be.
Because 104 just seems like a weird number, but I don't know.
maybe like 100 to 110.
And the
Yeah, it might
reason
roll.
why this is so special is because most spells in Last Epoch, they scale off of adaptive damage. Like, for instance, if you're running, like, Volcanic Orb, for instance, Fire Volcanic Orb, if you put adaptive damage on it, it will turn to fire damage. And vice versa. If you turn it to cold, it will turn to cold damage. The reason why these are so interesting, these implicits, is because you can force the damage type on something. Like, for instance, fire auras, normally, they're fire damage, right? You can only, or cold, or whatever. And there's a unique that gives you increased void damage per fire aura. Well, you just slap this baby on, and you get a bunch of spell void, even more with the volcanic orb stuff. And hallelujah, you have 150 flat spell void to scale off your void, your fire auras on your chest. And like all of a sudden, this starts to look actually halfway decent. Now, is it going to make fire auras good? Who knows? I'll have to test it. But you know, like that's the kind of stuff we like seeing in the game because it allows us to theory craft a lot more than just, you know, like when we were talking about when we were talking about the unique, we were talking about, hey, let's have a unique that can be used outside of its purpose. Well, that spell void damage is almost good enough to be used outside of its purpose. Now, obviously, you're still probably going to end up using it on mage because all of the other text on the item is insanely strong. But you can use this on a non-Volcanic Orb build. You can just use Volcanic Orb for buffs and then get that spell void damage for like your, like said, for your Fire Wars and stuff like that. There are other applications of it, and that's what I like about this.
I
And
am-
how good would it be if you just throw it on Void Knight?
I am so excited to tell you what my meme idea is with this. But
Oh, really?
I'm so excited. But before we get to that point, let's read through the item, and so I've already picked up my favorite part of the item, the implicit. I want both of you, as we read through this, to tell me like what stands out most to you. So for anyone who's not currently looking at the link, and again, if you're live here in Twitch chat, you should go ahead and click on that. This is Volcanic Orb gets converted to void damage. There's a 100% chance to gain a buff when you cast Volcanic Orb, and then there's a 34% chance to gain that buff when you're hit by your own Volcanic Orb. So you're going to gain at least one stack by casting it, and maybe another stack, about a third chance, when you're hit by your own Volcanic Orb. You get movement speed and mana regen per stack of the buff. You get +4 spell void damage per stack of the buff. All stacks are lost when you use a movement skill, and a final line of text that we didn't know about previous to exactly today. 19% of remaining Volcanic Orb cooldown is recovered when you use a melee attack and hit at least one enemy. We didn't know about
Sounds
that
like
going
it's a
into
range
this.
as well.
It's
Yeah,
it
it's,
looks like
it's a
a
very
range.
It looks
interesting
like a
line of
range.
text right there. So,
It is.
Dread, I think I know what your favorite line of text here is.
Oh,
Tell
it's
me
definitely it's definitely the bottom. The cooldown thing. So like we were talking about how like they're gonna make the spear just make Volcanic Orb good and like and you only use Volcanic Orb with this spear. Well, that's the line that makes it happen. Because if you did not know, to utilize the cooldown nodes on Volcanic Orb specifically, because you actually want to be casting it more than once every 4 seconds, because like us, we like dealing damage here at Epic Epoch, and the thing is, you gotta spend a lot of points to get wait, let me look here. I'm pulling it up right now, and you have to spend a lot of points just to get the cooldown. Just to get the cooldown, right? It's 7 points for all of it. 7 points for all the cooldown, right? 7. This is if you just care about the shrapnel and you don't care about like the Volcanic Orb damage and all that, like the Void Orb the orb damage. This is essentially a +7 to Volcanic Orb. +7 at the very least. And that sadly is why I instantly hate the item, is because now
And
you're just going to play Volcanic Orb with this. Like, oh yeah, I can play a different Volcanic Orb with different stuff. It's gonna suck. And +7 to a skill essentially is because every single Volcanic Orb likes the cooldown because you want to get the cooldown so you can spam Volcanic Orb to do damage.
Just pausing real quick. When you say every single Volcanic Orb, you mean like the one person out there playing Volcanic Orb?
It does require melee though too. I
Yeah.
feel like that's at least a little bit of a hurdle.
It is, but who's playing Volcanic Orb right now?
Yeah.
So I guess when you say melee, like you're using Mana Strike, right? And you're using the range
Range
Mana
Mana
Strike.
Strike.
Yeah. Oh, that is still a
Yeah.
melee skill, isn't it?
Yeah, it is.
does still count as a melee skill, yeah.
Interesting. Actually, so for
Hmm.
Volcanic Orb, because I actually have not played a build with it, does the shrapnel pierce?
You can make it pierce, yes.
You can
There's a
make it
node for
pierce.
that,
Okay,
yeah.
cool.
That's one of the nodes that requires
make it
a lot of
pierce
points to
yourself?
get to.
Can I get pierced?
And can it pierce through you?
Is this TOS all of a
It
sudden?
should pierce through you in theory. There's no reason it shouldn't.
So I
It
don't
looks
know
like
if
it does
yeah.
in the footage. Like there's a little bit of footage.
Yeah.
It's not well telegraphed, but yeah.
I
Essentially, go
I
ahead.
hope that the shrapnel itself is like slightly heat seeking. I hope that it tries
Oh
to
yeah,
hit
like
me.
wiggles, yeah.
If it doesn't hit me, if the hitbox isn't good enough, then I hate it. Like I hope that there's some leniency in like whether I'm actually getting hit by my own skill or not.
So essentially, what that plus like, so I'm going to assume that the Volcanic Orb converted to Void, it overrides the cold damage like change, and what that allows you to do is it allows you to grab all of the shrapnel damage inside Volcanic Orb, all of the shrapnel damage. It
Mhm.
allows you to get the shrapnel hit damage against chilled and just the generic shrapnel damage. You couldn't do this before because if you did this, your volcanic orb had a 4-second cooldown, or 3 second, well, yeah, 3-second cooldown, and you were a very sad panda. So it's like that's insane. Like you're just literally like getting all the damage just because you don't have to put points in the stinking cooldown.
All right,
Yeah.
Pi, what do you think? What's your favorite line of text on this? What stands out to you most?
So my favorite one is actually the +4 or the 4% increased movement speed and mana regen per stack of Corrupted Heraldry. Because my first question is, does it have a cap of how many stacks?
It's 12.
It is 12. Ooh, okay.
12 seconds.
Each stack lasts 12 seconds, which is pretty generous.
Okay. But in my head, I'm thinking of a little, like, you turn this item into a mini game where you are just chasing your Void Orb through the map, trying to get hit as much as possible, and just going as fast as you can, spamming Void Orbs, and just running around.
It sounds fun.
And I don't know if that would work, but it sounds interesting. And just keeping that
so,
stack up time and like running through, shooting out the void shrapnel projectile worms.
So before we move on, I want to tell you what my idea is for this. When this community voting for a community made unique item was first introduced, my desire was that whatever's created can backdoor into some other build. So I didn't want to create something that says Volcanic Orb deals 100% more damage. You can only use this item with Volcanic Orb, and any other use is nonsensical. So when they started, I guess when the community voted on having a two-handed spear, I was thinking, hey, wouldn't it be awesome if there was some kind of way to use this with Holy Trail? And you know, we don't have a spear that has flat damage on it right now. We could play some Holy Trail Void Knight with another 100 spell void damage on it. And like, I hope this thing isn't so rare. I hope that this thing drops common enough
like
that I can get a little bit of LP
Well,
on
it requires level 60, but I doubt they're going to be very generous with the LP values.
I would love to get some LP on this and play some void damage Holy Trail Void Knight with Anomaly. Oh, it'd be so cool.
That would be actually really cool.
See, the thing is... Oh, never mind. I'm dumb. Never mind. Continue.
Listen, can we... Is there developer in chat? If we use Holy Trail with this, can we make it purple?
Yeah, please.
Come on, make it purple, please. Oh,
I want
so
a
good.
purple Holy Trail eventually. Like if they're gonna add uniques, just give us a purple Holy Trail for some reason. I would love it.
Can't wait for MTX in this game.
Make it a circle. Make it like a line, like a circle. I don't know.
So, when it comes to this item, so you already did some like napkin math right now, Dread, talking about whether this item is going to give you a bunch more damage. You can focus on this. You save 7 points over there. Is this going to be another example of Akuna's Will from Path of Exile? Is this going to be an item that like is put in the game right now? It's kind of cool. It kind of bends the rules of the game, but it's just going to be outpaced once the skill tree changes. What's going to happen?
Essentially, this lives or dies by Volcanic Orb. If Volcanic Orb is good, this will be good. If it's not good, then this will not. Well, this might be good enough to make old Volcanic Orb. But as someone pointed out in chat here earlier, pretty sure probably Volcanic Orb is going to get like a skill tree change alongside like the change to like the visuals, right?
Master or something too.
Yeah, it's like, I'm pretty
Master,
sure they'll probably end up changing some stuff. Because the biggest problem with Volcanic Orb right now is it follows the old design philosophy of skills where just dump all your points. Just dump them all. You don't deserve to have points. It's like, look at this 0 out of 8 node. This 0 out of 5 node. This 0, I think it's the worst. I think it's one of the worst, one of the worst, like, problems in terms of this, like, problem in... Like the point dump problem. Like there's just so much to point dump. And it's like
it's funny. So any time that you see that on one of the skills in Last Epoch, it's actually just like an old design that hasn't been updated yet. So even today on the developer stream, people have been asking, Mike when he does his weekly stuff about this design paradigm. Like why are there 0 out of 9, 0 out of 8? Why does this exist? And Mike's been giving the same answer for a while now. Like that was their old philosophy. They get that it's bad. They're gonna update it. Having 1/4 of your points or even like 1/3 of your points into one bucket, that doesn't represent a cool and interesting decision making process.
1/3 of your points just to get like your cooldown to the point where the skill is playable is not something that should be the case.
So like I expect that to change, and like we know that they're going to take these things that are big point dumps and change it at some point. is this just an item that's going to make Volcanic Orb good for 3 months and then we throw it away? Do we only have 3 months
No,
to play this thing?
it's essentially a meme item. Like, you know, like you can make it good. Like you can play it, you can make it good. It's like a fun build. Like I'm trying to think of like a good example in Path of Exile. It's just gonna be fun. Like can you think of a paradigm pie, like a unique item that just makes a fun build that like it's not overpowered, it's just fun?
It does Dream Feather count? Do people use that thing anymore?
Replica Dream Feather is
Replica
used a
Dream
lot
Feather,
now with
yeah.
aura stacking though. It goes
Yeah.
back to that.
That's a lot more serious though than this.
Let me pull something up 1 sec.
Yeah, like this literally just lives or dies by how good Volcanic Orb is, pretty much. Like that's essentially the
It's
case.
very tied to the skill.
Like you can use it outside of the skill. You could use it on a Fire Aura build, technically. Like you could use it on a different kind of build and just use the flat damage scaling. But then you're casting Volcanic Orb for some reason, and it's like it literally is just live or die by Volcanic Orb.
So one of the things that I don't like to see in Last Epoch, it doesn't really feel like it has any, it doesn't feel like it's going to change, and it's here for now, and I don't like it. And it's like these items that are kind of pigeonholed into like exactly one skill. So
And I think that's fine if you have a bunch of items. I think that's fine if you have like PoE's level of items, where you just have so many that like there's just droves and droves that you forget about them all. I think it's fine to have one purpose items when you have that many. But in this game right now, currently, when we have that little items, like it feels bad when that happens, because it's like, well, this only works with one thing, and there's only one thing it works with, and that's like opposite of like Last Epoch's design in general, because the way they have the skill set up, there's a lot of different ways of using skills, yada yada yada. There's like when you think of like something like Maelstrom, you don't just think of Maelstrom damage, you don't just think of Maelstrom utility. There are multiple different ways of using this, and that's the problem with these uniques that are as niche as this. But at the same time, it's fine if there's a bunch of them.
So I guess we'll get to that point, but even in the short term, I would love this Rat City Impaler. Like, what about like it says 100% chance to gain buff when you cast Volcanic Orb, and then 30% chance to gain a buff when you get hit by Volcanic Orb. So like, could the first one, the on cast trigger, could that be like when you cast a Void skill? Or like when you cast a spell.
That would make it broken. That would make it broken. That's like that would be broken.
Just give me like a little glimmer of hope for using this with Devouring Orb. Come on.
That would be absolutely broken.
Devouring Orb. Yeah.
But like it's a two-hander.
It's
and,
it's like a pair of boots, a prefix of mana regen, and like a staff and a half. But like one item.
But Volatile Reversal is a movement skill.
Easy. Yeah, with to clear your stacks.
Yeah, and then you lose all your damage. Come on.
Yeah, no, I think it's fine the fact that it's locked to Volcanic Orb. I think, like I said, 99% of the problems with this item is associated with Volcanic Orb, is not the actual item itself.
It's got a lot of text on it. It's just a weird skill.
One thing I was thinking about though is because there's a class of unique items that they get overlooked because they're almost always bad, but just unique items that grant you a skill.
Yeah.
So, like, there's a Alluvian that like grants you the Tidal Wave skill. There's a one that grants you like a Water Orb that I can't remember the name of. It's like a compass thing.
Usanui's something.
Yes, yeah, something like that. And like I enjoy those items.
The Ulcer Compass, that's what I call it.
Yeah, there's that the one that grants you like a Mercenary Archer that I wish was good because it's cool. Because I like those thematically.
It is cool. You get to sacrifice them. It's funny.
Yeah, but like
it's good for upvotes.
What if this item was like just kind of a thought experiment? What if Volcanic Orb wasn't an ability on Sorcerer? What if this item gave you Volcanic Orb and it was just this ability? Like, how would that?
They already talked about that, and they said that they're very against that. Like,
well, yeah,
items that just give you skills. It seems so far.
But I mean, those exist, and it's like they exist in both games too. Because Path of Exile.
Oh no, I mean like a straight up. I mean a straight up skill that you can put on your bar to cast.
Like a skill you could spec into.
Like, if you could proc Volcanic Orb in some way, I think they would be okay with it. But
yeah,
yeah,
interesting. That feels like one of those things where, like we talked about earlier in today's podcast, where like it might be a cool idea and it's a fun concept to like sit here and explore, I don't think it fits in Last Epoch. But
No,
like in a
probably
different
not.
game, sure, totally. Like we've
Yeah.
been talking about all these other games like Ghost Lore and Slowermancer and even like V Rising right now. Like you have various states of, early access or 1.0 release. It's like maybe one of these games wants to do that. Like you get a skill, you get an item, it gives you a skill, you spec into it. Maybe
it's like
maybe
Diablo
that fits in a
2.
different game.
You know,
A
like
little bit, yeah.
your
The
enigmas
runes.
and stuff.
Yeah,
Maybe Diablo 4 brings it back.
maybe.
So I think that about wraps up what we wanted to talk about today. I know
Rad City.
we're under a tiny bit of time pressure. Pi, I know you got some
Unfortunately,
real life stuff
yeah.
to deal with. Is there maybe one more topic, any more conversation you want to sneak in here at the end?
Off the top of my head, not that I can really think of. I'm
Greg,
excited
what
to
about
see
you?
like where items like this go, though.
By the way, the new volcanic orb, the void volcanic orb, definitely looks sick.
The
The only-
animation's
Man,
gorgeous.
every
Yeah.
time they update something, have you seen like the spoiler images
Yeah.
for like the new Sabertooth and the new armored bear pet?
I have not. I need
My
they look
biggest
so
problem
good.
with this is if you can just compare it to like D2 Frozen Orb and you look at how many projectiles that spits out and you just look at this fucking it's like, oh mom, I want like Frozen Orb. The Frozen Orb we have at home, it's this, and it's like it's spewing out like a third of the projectiles. I know it'd be OP if it spit out more. I don't love a node that
I mean, would
like,
it be though? Just reduce the damage, right?
yeah, well yeah,
Less
that
damage,
yeah.
more area. It's a common trade-off.
I
And
agree.
I would
They don't
happily
like that
use it
though.
in order to apply armor.
Look at Static Orb. Like Static Orb had that and they destroyed it.
I guess if you want to relive that, you can go play Eye of Winter and Path. So.
Yeah, I know. That's what it seems like it's gonna have to be.
All right,
And
so I think
spoiling Dread's third build of the league already.
God.
with Tornado, wow.
Wow, it actually is kind of.
That would
wait,
work.
wait,
That,
that
that
sounds
would
good.
work.
All right,
actually might work.
before we go off on another tangent talking about Path of Exile, I think that's going to wrap it up for the day. So if you're here live watching on Twitch, thank you so much for joining us. Dread, thank you for being my co-host. I always appreciate that.
Of course, anytime.
And AlmostPI, thank you for being here as well. I know you're a busy person.
Good to hang out.
And where can we find you outside of this podcast if we're looking for your content?
So I do have Twitch. It's AlmostPI. I stream there occasionally, especially when I do like race events, either in Last Epoch or Path of Exile. Those are always fun.
Hopefully when Last Epoch gets a little bit more, I guess in September is when we're looking for our next patches. Maybe we'll see you there.
Fingers crossed. Oh yeah,
Yes,
I've been enjoying playing it casually. I'm actually working on trying a judgment build, and I've been playing my Cold Dot Bear. It's a lot of fun.
Ooh, excellent. So for all of us here at Epic Epoch, thank you for being here. Appreciate it. And you know what? We'll see you next time.